And today, we're diving into something truly speculative, but honestly fascinating, from our source material. It's called the Pineal Synth.
Right, this idea for a non-invasive device.
Yeah, aimed at triggering the release of endogenous DMT. That's the psychedelic compound our bodies supposedly make naturally.
It definitely has a sci-fi ring to it, I'll admit, but the scientific ideas underpinning it are quite intriguing, based on some real biological hypotheses.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the science behind this, well, audacious idea.
Explore the tech that might actually make it plausible someday.
And consider the ripples, the ethical, the social questions it raises.
Ultimately asking what it means for how we understand consciousness itself.
Okay, so let's get into it. What exactly is this endogenous DMT we're talking about?
Well, DMT stands for dimethyltryptamine. Many people know it as a powerful psychedelic, gives you those really intense but short experiences.
Right, the kind people smoke or take in ayahuasca.
Exactly. But what's key here from the source material is that DMT is also produced naturally, endogenously, inside the human body, just in tiny amounts.
So it's not just something external we might take. It's already part of us.
That's the crucial point. Its exact role, well, that's still debated, definitely. But the most likely production sites are thought to be the pineal gland.
That tiny little gland deep in the brain.
Yeah, that's the classic one. But maybe also other places like peripheral tissues in the lungs, maybe even the retina. It's part of our biochemistry.
And the hypothesis our source explores is that maybe temporary spikes in this natural DMT happen during those extraordinary states we mentioned earlier.
Exactly, like dreaming, near-death experiences, or NDEs.
Deep meditation, too.
Deep meditation, possibly childbirth, moments of extreme stress. The idea is these profound experiences might have this specific biochemical signature.
Wow. So not just psychological, but neurochemical events.
And if that turns out to be true, if those states really provide things like emotional release or creative bursts or spiritual feelings,
Then what?
then, imagine the implications. A device that could selectively trigger that same biochemical cascade, but without needing an external drug.
That would be huge.
The source compares it to the pacemaker for cardiology. It would be that revolutionary for consciousness research. For you listening, it's about potentially accessing and studying these profound internal states in a completely new way.
Okay, so how could we even begin to think about building such a thing? This is where the source brings in a really unexpected analogy.
Yeah, this part's interesting. It draws parallels with sexual stimulators. Vibrators, essentially.
Sounds a bit strange at first, maybe, but the logic is actually quite compelling when you break it down.
It is. Think about why they work effectively. First, targeted mechanical energy. Meaning precise frequency and amplitude convert that motion directly into nerve firing. So for a pineal synth, that translates to delivering energy, maybe magnetic, acoustic, optical, electrical tune, very specifically to the tissue near the pineal gland.
Okay, precision energy delivery. Got it. What else?
Second, control. Fast on-off, intensity control. Users can adjust the sensation, avoid discomfort.
Right, you wouldn't want it to be overwhelming or unpleasant.
Exactly. So for the pineal synth, this highlights the need for real-time feedback, maybe EEG monitoring brainwaves, or even fMRI. You'd need to keep any DMT surge below, say, a dysphoric threshold. Gentle guidance.
Makes sense. And the third point from the analogy?
Portability and safety. They're made of user-friendly, safe materials, which encourages regular use if desired.
So the pineal synth should ideally be non-invasive, like a headset.
Yeah, perhaps a headset with coils, or maybe a focused ultrasound helmet, made from medical-grade, MRI-compatible plastics. Design is key for something like this.
Okay, so based on those principles, what actual technologies do we have now that could be relevant? The source points to a few existing tools.
Well, one big one is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
That's used for depression, right?
Yes, often for depression at certain frequencies, and also for mapping brain areas like the motor cortex and others. But what's really relevant here are the deep TMS coils.
Deep TMS.
They can focus magnetic pulses deeper into the brain, reaching midline structures maybe 3 or 4 centimeters down. Yeah. That's getting close to the pineal gland's location.
Interesting. What else is in the toolkit?
Then there's transcranial focused ultrasound, tFUS.
Ultrasound through the skull.
Yeah. It offers even more precise targeting, like millimeter scale accuracy, and can reach depths TMS might struggle with.
And what does it do?
Well, studies show it can temporarily open the blood-brain barrier in targeted spots. which could be important. And it can directly modulate brain activity, too. Human trials are ongoing. It's a powerful potential tool.
Okay, TMS, tFUS, anything else?
There's also near-infrared photobiomodulation using light.
Light. How does that work?
Specific wavelengths, like 810 nanometers from LEDs, seem to increase the activity of an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. It's involved in cellular energy.
And the effect?
Early studies link this to changes in brain rhythms, like alpha and theta waves, which you sometimes see in meditative states. So it's about gently influencing brain energy and activity patterns.
The source also mentioned peripheral routes, like an assist.
Right, briefly. Things like stimulating the vagus nerve, or maybe using ultrasound on the adrenal medulla. The idea there is maybe you could boost the enzymes needed for tryptamine synthesis more systemically, kind of prepping the whole system.
So multiple technologies working together.
That seems to be the most plausible path, according to the source. Because, and this is important, while each of these methods shows some evidence for shifting brain chemistry or activity, no single study has definitively shown one of them causing an endogenous DMT spike on its own. Not yet, anyway.
Okay, so you need to combine them.
The thinking is yes, a multimodal approach, stacking weaker, subtle effects from different technologies. TMS, tFUS, light might be the way to gently nudge the system into the desired state without being too forceful, like hitting a target with several precise darts instead of one big hammer.
Okay, that makes sense. So combining these, how does the source actually picture this Pineal Synth MKI? What would it look like?
The concept is a non-invasive prototype, probably looking like a helmet shell, but modular.
Modular meaning you could swap parts in and out.
Potentially, yeah, for upgrades or different combinations. Inside this helmet, the MKI concept gets pretty specific.
Okay, like what components?
A figure-8 deep TMS coil, delivering those focused magnetic pulses, specifying parameters like 40-80 millitesla at around 25 hertz,
Very precise.
and a phased array tFUS transducer running at something like 650 kilohertz for that deep focused ultrasound energy.
Plus the light.
Yep, a ring of those 810 nanometer LEDs for the photobiomodulation effect, maybe around 80 milliwatts per square centimeter intensity.
And how would it know what's happening in the brain? The feedback loop.
Crucial part, it would need sensors. Maybe an ear clip photoplethysmograph.
For heart rate and blood flow.
Exactly. And a forehead EEG sensor to monitor brainwave activity, alpha, beta, theta, gamma waves.
All controlled by.
An onboard FPGA. That's a type of programmable chip, very fast, needed to process all that sensor data in real time and adjust the stimulation accordingly. Closed loop control.
And the user interface? How would someone use it?
Probably a companion phone app. You could select different journey presets, maybe tailor the experience slightly. The goal is precise control, moving from theory to something potentially usable.
Okay, let's walk through how it would actually work, hypothetically, a step-by-step journey.
Right, so first step, baseline. The device measures your normal EDG patterns, your resting alpha and beta power, and your heart rate variability, your HRV. Gets a snapshot of your current state.
Establishing the starting point.
Then comes the priming phase, maybe a short burst of tFUS.
The ultrasound. Why?
The idea is twofold. Maybe temporarily make the blood-brain barrier slightly more permeable locally, near the target area, and also gently nudge certain brain circuits, like in the thalamus, towards producing more theta rhythms.
Theta waves. Associated with drowsiness or meditation, right?
Kind of setting the stage, yeah. Getting the brain into a more receptive state.
Okay, primed. What's next?
Then the main stimulation kicks in. The deep TMS ramps up, but not continuously, in a patterned way.
Like pulses.
Yeah, the source gives an example like 5 seconds on, 10 seconds off, repeating. The goal is to entrain the pineal tissue itself, encourage its cells to fire in a specific rhythm.
Well, that's happening.
The light.
Exactly. Concurrently, the near-infrared LEDs would be on, providing that photobiomodulation. The hypothesis here is that this boosts mitochondrial energy production.
Powering up the cells.
Essentially, yeah. Providing the necessary energy and maybe substrates for the key enzyme, N-methyltransferase, which is the one thought to actually synthesize DMT.
Okay, so you're priming, stimulating, and providing energy. How does it know if it's working? That's the feedback loop. The EEG and heart rate sensors are constantly monitoring. They're looking for a specific signature.
A sign of onset?
Possibly. The source suggests looking for something like increased gamma coherence in the EEG. That's a brainwave pattern, sometimes linked to heightened consciousness or focus combined with a slowing of heart rate variability.
And if it sees that signature?
Then the system knows something is happening. The control system, that FPGA, would then carefully adjust the intensity of the TMS and maybe the tFUS, throttle it back if needed.
Why throttle it?
To keep the experience within safe and desirable limits. You want to avoid inducing seizures or even just headaches or anxiety. It's about maintaining that gentle nudge, not pushing too hard. A real biofeedback dance. That precise real-time control is really the key to making this concept seem less like pure sci-fi and more like, well, complex engineering.
Definitely. But getting from this concept, this NKI idea, to something real, that involves major hurdles, right? The source talks about validation.
Oh, absolutely. Huge hurdles. First up is just basic safety and tolerability.
Making sure it doesn't, cook your brain or cause ringing in your ears.
Pretty much. That could take maybe 12 months, running tests on, say, 20 volunteers, comparing the real device to a sham or placebo version, checking for heating, tinnitus, effects on heart rhythm, standard stuff for any new brain device.
Okay, safety first, then the big one, proving it actually does increase endogenous DMT.
That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? This is much harder. It would probably start with animal models, rodents perhaps, using techniques like microdialysis to directly sample cerebrospinal fluid and measure DMT levels during stimulation.
And in humans.
That's trickier. Maybe advanced PE scans using specific radioactive tracers that bind to receptors affected by DMT, or perhaps indirectly measure enzyme activity. This biochemical proof stage could easily take 2 to 3 years. It's a big scientific leap.
Assuming you can prove it works biochemically, you'd still need to know what the experience is like, right?
Exactly. Subjective concordance. Does the experience reported by users actually resemble a known DMT state?
How would you measure that?
You could use standardized questionnaires, like the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, and compare the scores from people using the device to scores from people given a known low dose of IV DMT in a clinical setting.
Comparing the subjective effects.
Right. Gathering that kind of data meaningfully could take another 3 or 4 years.
So, safety, biochemistry, subjective experience. Then you have to deal with regulators.
Yep. The regulatory pathway. Maybe 4 to 6 years. You'd likely aim for something like the FDA's breakthrough device designation.
Because it's novel.
And potentially offers a new type of treatment or experience. But it would need intense oversight from institutional review boards, probably operating under guidelines similar to those being developed for psychedelic therapies, which raises that fascinating question.
How do you regulate something like this? It's not quite a drug, not quite a standard medical device.
Exactly. That leads straight into the broader implications, the ethical, legal, social stuff. ELSI, as they call it.
Right, because a device like this wouldn't just exist in a lab.
No way! Think about informed consent and screening. Just like, say, ketamine clinics screen out people with a high risk of mania.
You need rigorous screening for this.
Absolutely. Especially filtering for things like personal or family history of psychosis. The potential risks would need very careful management.
What about misuse? Abuse potential?
That's a definite concern. Unlike a pill you can take home, the hardware itself offers some control possibilities. Maybe lock it to clinical settings initially.
Or require cloud-based prescriptions.
Oh.
Like a digital key.
Something like that. Ways to potentially limit widespread uncontrolled use, though clever people always find workarounds.
And culturally. How would society react?
That's a huge question. Endogenous mystical states potentially available on demand. How does that interact with established religious or spiritual practices?
Could it devalue them? Or supplement them?
Both are possible. You might see backlash, maybe fears similar to those early VR ego death anxieties people had. It really taps into deep cultural nerves about consciousness and spirituality. It forces a conversation about the relationship between traditional inner work and technological shortcuts.
Yeah, that tension is powerful. And then there's the issue of who owns this technology.
Right, intellectual property. If someone patents the specific stimulation waveforms that work,
Well, they could essentially control access to these states.
that's the risk. The source floats an alternative, an open hardware consortium.
Yeah.
Sharing the designs, democratizing access, it's a very different model.
An open source approach to consciousness tech.
Yeah,
Fascinating. Does the source suggest specific next steps for research?
it does. Things like really digging deep into the existing scientific literature on the enzymes involved, their expression patterns.
Building a better theoretical foundation.
Yeah. And also practical stuff like creating a bench prototype using a 3D printed phantom model of the pineal region to test the physics, the energy delivery.
Testing it without using a real brain first.
Makes sense. Also, doing more computer modeling in silico work to optimize, say, the ultrasound focusing, and importantly, human-centered design.
Talking to potential users.
And experts, psychedelic therapists, long-term meditators, neurologists, ethicists, understanding their hopes, fears, and design needs before building the final thing.
So wrapping this up, it feels like we're saying this pineal synth concept, well, definitely still speculative today.
Highly speculative, yeah. The direct evidence isn't there yet.
The underlying technologies are advancing rapidly. Non-invasive brain stimulation, biosensing, real-time control.
Exactly. Those converging trends make something like a DMT release stimulator seem technically conceivable. Maybe not tomorrow, but perhaps within a decade or so. The building blocks are becoming visible.
And the conclusion from the source seems to be that the biggest challenge might not even be the engineering.
Right. It's about us. Whether society chooses to pursue this, how we regulate it, or if we decide to reject it altogether. That decision will depend on thoughtful stewardship, on how we handle the potential for unlocking these altered states.
It really puts the responsibility on us to think carefully.
A profound responsibility, for sure.
So here's the final thought to leave you with. If a device could offer a reliable glimpse into these profound internal states usually reached through intense spiritual practice, or maybe exogenous substances, or just spontaneously, what would that mean?
What would it mean for your own journey of self-discovery?
And for our collective understanding of consciousness itself, how does our definition of what's real or spiritual change when technology can potentially open those doors?